Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Dunnigan Mott Music and Movie Podcast, episode number 14. So, today, in episode 13 last week, I already revealed which episode we're going to do next. So, today, my pick. So, today we're going to be talking about 1983's Eric Clapton, Money and Cigarettes. So, this was released 1983, February of 83 to be exact. It was recorded in late 1982 at Compass Point Studios, Nassau, Bahamas, or Compass Point Studios. I said Compass, probably the same difference. This was the first Clapton album to be featured on the Warner Brothers Records label and the Duck subsidiary label. And this is the first album that Clapton recorded after his first rehabilitation from alcoholism. And this was produced by Clapton and Tom Dowd. And of course, Tom Dowd, a longtime producer for Clapton. And I mean, we've talked about this album a little bit in the Clapton discography. Well, I say a little bit. I think we spent a good little majority of the episode on it, as we did with each studio album. But this is going to be a full on kind of analyzation of this album, as usual with the other albums that we do. And we're just going to get on here and just speak our opinions on this album, what we think of each song. You know the drill by this point. So this is our first episode to where we dive into the Clapton discography. Of course, we did Derek the Domino's Layla as the first episode, and now we're doing a Clapton solo album. So, I've Got a Rock and Roll Heart was the first single released in January 1983. The Shape You're In was released March 83. That's the second single. And Slow Down Linda was released in May of 83. And the final single, Everybody Ought to Make a Change, was released in 1983. It just says 1983. But this album is kind of a turning point in Clapton's career. I mean, of course, we enter the 80s by this point. And pretty much Clapton, it was kind of a point to where Clapton was in a time that really didn't rely on guitar. And I get a huge new wave-ish feel from this album. And I think it was this album was kind of Clapton seeing which direction he could go in the 80s. And this is the final album of the country trilogy, as I call it. And yeah, I really dig this album. I used to not dig this album, but now I do. And he pretty much dropped his whole studio band. Previously, he had a band consisting of Henry Spinetti on the drums, Gary Brooker on keyboards, of course, he from Procol Harum, and Chris Stanton on keyboards, and Dave Marquis on the bass, and Albert Lee on guitar. I had a brain problem there. And of course, Clapton rounding out the lineup. So they started recording this album, and Clapton has went on record saying that this album had a very pub atmosphere and represented a continuation of his work with Ronnie Lane. But producer Tom Dowd was not pleased with the original recordings with that version of the band, and pretty much after that, they fired everyone in the band but Albert Lee, and they brought in a brand new lineup to record this album. And from what I see here, it says that the band suffered from multiple collapses during the recording sessions, actually. So that's pretty interesting. And the new band, of course, is Clapton and Albert Lee on guitar, Ry Cooder on guitar, Donald Duck Dunn on Bass, Roger Hawkins from the Muscle Shoals studio. He's part of that session band. He's on drums. And you've also got Peter Solly or Pete Solly on keyboards, the original keyboardist of Whitesnake, actually. So, can't remember right now if I said it or not, but with me today is Stephen Mott, and he's got some more backstory for you. So I almost called you Clapton, Stephen, but Stephen,
Yay. Go ahead and call me that. Yeah, great.
you talk a little bit about this album.
All right, brother. Zephus. Okay. This album came between Another Ticket and Behind the Sun, if Wikipedia did not lie to me, in 1983. Recording sessions for the album had begun, what the frick ever, but Clapton didn't think that the band was serious enough, and that they wasn't taking their job seriously enough, and they were just messing around, just playing whatever, like in a club or something. But he just got rid of them mainly because I read in his book that he just thought they were just goofing around, and just they didn't take it as seriously as he wanted them to, or as he was, and so he just trashed the album. I mean, not the album, the band, pretty much, and got a new band. Like you said, everybody was gone but Albert Lee, and I think that was a pretty good choice, judging by how this album turned out. And we're going to get into it later, but this is going to be one of our better reviews as far as the rating goes. So back to you, drummer.
Okay, so we found a little bit of conflicting information with the whole sacking of the band. I said it was Tom Dowd. You said that it was Clapton himself. So, I mean, if it came from Clapton, it's got to be true. But this is on Wikipedia, so Wikipedia is not always the most trusty source or trustworthy source in the world. So, with that said, I think this was a relatively successful album on its release, and it reached the top 10 in 2 countries, followed by 4 positions in the album's charts top 20. Okay, I just got that weird, but in Germany it went number 22 on the charts, and in the Netherlands and United States it ranked on position 16. In the United Kingdom and New Zealand, the album peaked at number 13 and 11. And this was one of the biggest charting or highest charting albums in Sweden. And in Norway, it peaked number 3, making it the highest position for the release. So this done pretty successful worldwide, pretty much. And it reached number 5 in Sweden. I didn't say that, but yeah, I mean, this, like I said earlier, was a turning point in the Clapton discography. I think he was getting much more into that 80s era type music. Of course, after this, August, Behind the Sun, stuff like that, he got a lot more keyboard oriented, and you had Phil Collins in there as producer for a lot of it. So, I mean, it became a lot more commercial. But this is kind of an oddball album. We like our oddball albums on this particular show. So this was my pick, Money and Cigarettes. And the title actually comes from Clapton saying that was all he had left after he beat alcoholism. So, and I love the album cover. It's just Clapton standing in a room with this table, and it has a guitar just melting down the side of the table. And I'm always like that album cover. I need to get this on vinyl and CD. I actually don't own this album in any physical media. But this is an album I have a weird backstory with, because I didn't originally like this album. Other than about 2 or 3 songs, I hated this album. I thought it was one of the worst things I'd ever heard in my life. But going off the steam of me listening back to the Crossroads box set when I eventually got it. I went back and revisited this album, and I have to say I enjoy it. I didn't take notes for this album for this review. I've heard this album many, many times since my first listen, so I really enjoy this album quite a bit now. So, I mean, this isn't a new album for me to listen to like a lot of the other albums have been, and I guess we can get into this album if you're ready, Stephen. So, what do you think?
All right, yeah, brother, I'm ready.
Alrighty. Well, we start this album off with a cover by Sleepy John Estes. Everybody ought to make a change. This is one of the tracks I originally really liked off the album. And I think this is a really good opener for the album. It's a bluesier track, like I said. And I think it's a really good song. Overall, I think Everybody Ought to Make a Change is a good song. I remember hearing it live on the Arms shows. They opened the show with this, and it goes over well live. I think it's a good opener and one of Clapton's best songs of the '80s. This is one of my favorites off the album. So that's all I have for this particular track. One of my favorites off the album. I really, really enjoy it. So, Steven, what do you think of this track?
On that live version you're talking about, that's one of my favorites of his. My favorite of his performances. Tongue tied, whatever. Anyway, because he plays slide on that one live. Anyway, I think Eric should play a lot more slide. On this one, I can tell there's I guess it's Rod Cooder on the other guitar or the other guy, Albert Lee. I really can't tell. But I know Eric's in there too. I think he should play a lot more slide anyway, in general, not just on this track. But just to be clear, overall. And anyway, a very blues oriented song altogether. Even the main riff is blues oriented, kind of rooted. As always with Eric and his playing. Well, except for his most two commercialized albums, August and Behind the Sun. Other than that, and still some then, but this album has blues oriented stuff all through it. It's just to me kind of a rock tinge with country and a lot of blues playing in it. Is really what this album is, and kind of pub sounding. But overall, everybody ought to make a change. Yep, this is a very good one. Great riff and everything, and it has a very classic sound to it. So take that as however you want to take it. But back to you, brother.
All righty, and yeah, they're very, very great slide work on this, and I really enjoy it. And that's the one thing that I like that they introduced into this album a little bit. They actually added some kind of dueling guitars, and I'm assuming it's more between Clapton and Albert Lee than I think Ry Cooder more or less plays like kind of additional guitar and kind of just basically keeps the rhythm, but plays a little bit kind of some lead to kind of enhance the music itself. But I like that they did that, and like I said earlier, this is this is the end of the country trilogy for Clapton. Because I think from Backless up to this album, it has this very country-ish atmosphere, of course, with Backless and on up into Another Ticket. One of his biggest influences was Don Williams, and of course Don Williams being a country artist. But I digress from that. Everybody Ought to Make a Change, a very good opener, and then we move to the next track, The Shape You're In. Of course, I talked about it earlier. This is the only track, I believe, on the Crossroads box set. Maybe another song coming up is on there as well. I can't remember right off the top of my head. But now I like this song. It starts out with this very kind of more bluesier riff and then enters into this kind of new wave-ish type song. And I think it's a really good song. And I mean, of course, the theme of it seems to be about an alcoholic woman that Clapton was with or something like that just kind of just got a little bit too carried away in public as far as her alcoholism goes. That's what I get from the song. Maybe I'm totally wrong. And there's another song on the album that kind of follows that similar theme, but in a totally different manner. And I like it. I think The Shape You're In is very good. I do enjoy the song a little bit better live. I think it has a much better flow to it live. You can hear a bootleg on YouTube from Germany, '83. And I'll talk a little bit about the tour after we review this album. The Shape You're In, really, really good song. So do you, Stephen. What's your thoughts on The Shape You're In?
That's interesting. I didn't know it was ever done live. I'd never heard it. But during this album, there's a lot of, like you just said, a lot of dual guitar for the solos and stuff. Mostly for the solos, and I'm not all the way sure who it is. I know it's one of them's Eric, obviously, one side of it, and then it's either Ry Cooder or Albert Lee. But if I had to put my money on it, I'd say it was Albert Lee because he has a distinct guitar sound. It's unmistakable, and it has that tinge to it. A lot of it does of the lead stuff. Some of it sounds like somebody totally different, in which I would just come to assume that it was Ry Cooder, which I'm not very familiar with at all. The only reason I know that name is because of this album, and I've never heard of him anywhere else, really. So I wouldn't know his style or anything else anyway. But I have heard Albert Lee a lot, and he's a country guitarist that can fit into different genres, basically, is what I gather from it, or in my opinion. Because I can tell that's where he started at. And, some people, they can go into genres and they can make it sound pretty good. But to me, Clapton, he could try his hardest to sound country, and it still wouldn't come out that way. It's tinged with it, but it's just he could try his hardest. And the closest he ever came to sounding really country is on the album Old Sock. On a couple of tunes, he had a steel guitar in it, and that's the closest his music ever came to sounding really country. Down home, old school country. So, just to comment on that. But this one, like you said, this is basically a blues song, in my opinion, because of the way that the riff is. I learned this. It's a pretty simple riff. I've learned it a long time ago because I've always thought it was cool and a good rhythm. And something I'd also like to add is this album, out of any album I've almost ever heard by Clapton, this has got the most originals. If you notice, on any other Clapton album, he has a few sprinkled in, but not as much as this album. All the way through, you find them. We'll get to some later, a lot later. But back to you, brother.
Okay. And I talked about, I said this had kind of a new wave-ish feel, and also new wave country blues, if that makes any sense at all. That's the vibe I get from this song overall. And I think it's a pretty cool song overall, like I've said previously. So then we move to the next track, Ain't Going Down, or Ain't Going Down, actually. And as with the previous song, The Shape You're In, both are Clapton original tracks. And very Dire Straits has this very new wave-ish feel as well. Really good song. Another one that's actually, you find it live on, well, you find a live version on YouTube, and it actually goes through very well live. And Ain't Going Down, one I used to not like I said earlier, I didn't like but about one or two songs, maybe, well, three songs off this album, somewhere in that neighborhood. And this one actually took a while for me to grow on and start liking. But now I think it's a very good song. One of the best songs on the album as far as music goes. I think it's some very great music. And that's pretty much all I have. It was performed live, and I may put the versions of these tracks live in the description of the episode. So to you, Stephen, Ain't Going Down.
I've always loved this one, and to me, this is the best track on the album. But not by far. It's just not saying much really. But this is the best one on the album, in my opinion, altogether. This really shows that Clapton is very capable as a songwriter. But the words sound kind of put together in a rhythmic way and not really making a lot of sense, to tell you the truth. They sound kind of poetic, but don't really make a lot of sense, if that makes any sense. So basically, nonsensical poetry. Anyway, the bass line really took this song to the next level, and as well as the spectacular lead playing by Eric. And I know Eric's style enough to where I know this is Eric playing on this whole lead, so I do know that much. But I think that also took it to the next level as well, the lead playing. And there's not much to it instrumentally. It's just the production was very good on this album as far as that goes, making the band have a very full and thick sound, but not really have a lot of instrumentation. That shows that, whoever produced it, which you said Tom Dowd and Eric, really knew what they were doing, obviously. So back to you.
Okay. And yeah, some great guitar solos. I keep having a brain problem on this episode. But some great guitar solos on this particular track. Then we move to track number 4, and probably the best known song on this album. This was kind of the big single. I believe it was the first single off the album. I said it earlier. Yeah, the first single. And it shows some other songwriters. So I'm assuming this was kind of something written by someone else, just given to Clapton. It was a single written for the album by professional songwriters. And that is I've Got a Rock and Roll Heart. I really enjoy this song. It shows what is to come for Clapton as far as the whole commercial aspect, because this song in particular is very commercial, and I like it though. I mean, I get off to 55 Chevrolets, I get off to screaming guitars. That's the main part of the chorus, and I really enjoy it. I think it's a great song and one of the best songs on here. And overall, I really enjoy it. So, and this was actually performed live as well. He brought it back here more recently and done an acoustic arrangement of it, which was pretty interesting sounding. But that's it for me, and a great solo on this track as well. So, Steven, what's your thoughts on I've Got a Rock and Roll Heart?
To tell you the truth, I don't know where you're getting some of these live clips and stuff from, because I've never heard a live version of this for sure. But that's very interesting. I've got a rock and roll heart. Yes, again, lead guitar playing does not get any better than this by Eric. See, that's what happens when I try to read my notes verbatim. It doesn't come out right. But let me just say that again. Eric is the best lead guitar player ever. Okay, there we go. I said it. Okay, anyway. Great song. And however, I did not get a commercial vibe from it. I got just not classic rock, but something kind of related to that. Something rockish. Something like that. Kind of tinged with some blues for sure. I guess. Well, sort of. But it has a mixture of a lot of things. But the production sounded sort of different. The production was a lot different with this song as opposed to the other ones on the album. And I think that's because they probably knew this was going to be a single, the main single, so they kind of wanted to work it up differently. And the other songs kind of remind me of not all the songs, but we'll get to it later. I'll just get into it later about that. But great song. Back to you, brother.
All righty. We move to track number 5, and I'm assuming this is the end of the original vinyl. I'll look while you're talking about this song, or the end of side 1 of the original vinyl, if I didn't say it. Man Overboard, another Clapton original track, written solely by him. And one I used to think was terrible. I mean, the whole chorus, I'm a man on fire, I'm a man overboard, or whatever it is. I like it. I think it's a pretty cool song. I mean, it has more of a country-ish vibe to it on this particular track. It's kind of feels like the previous album, Another Ticket, in a way. I could see this song in particular being on that album. But I like it. I think Man Overboard is a pretty good song, and that's pretty much all I have. Pretty good song, Man Overboard. So do you, Steven?
Well, I've always liked it, and you can hear deep roots blues type playing in it. Not the song itself, but the stuff that plays over it, playing over the track lead wise, and that's the common trademark of Eric's. And he's the only person that can pretty much make this work over different genres. Anybody else, it does not sound right at all. It sounds like crap. When other players try to play like this sort of slide blues and stuff over rock and different stuff, and it sounds like just crap. It sounds terrible. But Eric made it really work with this whole album in that respect, and I think it's a really good chorus as opposed to you. Well, not great. I mean, it was an okay idea, and they made it even better by the instrumentation with it. I think that's kind of a big thing with this whole album. The songs themselves, I've said this before about other albums with Stevie Ray Vaughan himself and stuff, but I was going to say later that this kind of reminds me of SRV, but I'll tell you about that later. Anyway, this one in particular, it's one of those that really wasn't that great of one to start with, but then the band execution, the production really made it into something a lot higher level quality to listen to. So I think that's my opinion, and it's a pretty good song, but that's just because of the band mainly. Back to you.
Okay, and this was the final song on side one of the original vinyl LP. So then we moved to track number 6, Wonderful Tonight. Oh, I mean, Pretty Girl. This is the obligatory ballad on the album. Of course, for the past several albums, Clapton had kind of got in the habit of doing ballads. And this track, Pretty Girl, it's a good song. I think it's a very well done song. I said so it's a it's a ballad. I like the acoustic solo in this particular track quite a bit. And overall, I think it's a really good ballad. And this was not released as a single, I don't believe. I think it was an album track only. Yeah, this was an album track only. And I don't think this has ever been performed live other than the previous 4 songs, or the first 4 tracks. Those were the only ones performed live. And then there's a couple coming up that were performed live. And I think another one actually was too. But Pretty Girl, I mean, it's the obligatory Wonderful Tonight-esque ballad. You had Another Ticket on the previous album. You had, I guess you could say, Promises is the one on Backless. Then, of course, you had Wonderful Tonight on Slow Hand. And then the next album, you had a few ballads. Then August, I guess you could say Holy Mother is the Wonderful Tonight of that album, and then the next album, Lead Me On. But I digress. We're getting off on a little tangent here, at least I am. So, Stephen, what's your thoughts on Pretty Girl?
I think it's a great overall song, like you said, ballad, and pretty much a trend of his to just add it in there, and maybe not the motive behind it probably wasn't so much that as he probably just had it written, and he just stuck it in there. But also, with this album, there isn't a whole lot of instrumentation to it, and I already said this, but the production crew did a great job on this one, especially to make it sound very full, even though this one had a lot of keyboard work in it, and that's what makes it unique from the other tracks. This is probably the most unique one on the whole album, in my opinion, because of the organ over the top of it. And great song. And back to you.
All right, so that's track 6, opener to the second side of the vinyl, Pretty Girl. I like it. I think it's a good track. So then we move to track number 7, Man in Love. It starts with this kind of traditional blues lick, kind of a bluesy country-ish lick, and reminds me of the track Honky Tonkin'. If you never heard, or Honky Tonk, if you never heard it, go look it up. It's an old kind of instrumental from back in the day, and I know it because I played it several times. But of course, as Stevens mentioned several times, the Opry. So I played it there as an opener to the show. But getting on with the track, "Man in Love," I mean, it's a country blues song, another Clapton original, as with the previous two tracks. And I like it. I think it's a cool, laid back, bluesier, country-ish number. And I like it. I think "Man in Love's" a very good song. So do you, Stephen?
Man in Love, track number 7. This reminds me of something SRV or Stevie Ray Vaughan. For those of you who don't know what that means, which you should, might come up with, and because it's very simple in structure. That's the main reason it kind of reminds me of it. And two, because this reminds me of something that could be off of one of the albums that we've reviewed before, The Sky is Crying. I believe it's called, by Stevie Ray Vaughan, which is a compilation. But anyways, it seems like it has that vibe to it to me. It just kind of made me think of it, mainly because of the structure of it. And like you said, it's basically blues and very, Clapton pretty much always has the blues tinges to stuff, and that's a trend with this album for sure. And this song very much belongs on the album versus Pretty Girl and some other stuff like Ain't Going Down and Rock and Roll Heart. That those three really almost don't sound like they belong on this album as much as this track does. It kind of doesn't fit the theme as much as the pub sound, but this is one of those that has a pub sound, especially. And but I really love it, mainly because of that quality to it. I think if it didn't have that quality, it wouldn't be as good. Simply put, that's the only thing I can think to describe it. But to you, brother.
All righty. So speaking of blues, and I do also, before we move to the next track, I totally agree with you with the Stevie Ray Vaughan thing. I could totally picture Stevie Ray doing a track like this or doing this song. I would have loved for him to do a version or a rendition of this track. That'd been very cool. But speaking of blues, we move to a straightforward blues song. And this is another one between the first track. This is the second one that I remember originally really enjoying, and I still love it. It's a cool song, crosscut song, a classic blues song. It says written by R.G. Ford here, and I like it. I think it's a good song. It's a good blues cover, and he's played it off and on throughout. I know he did bring it back on the From the Cradle tour, and you can see a live version of that on YouTube. And I think it's a very good song, one of the best tracks on the album. So do you, Stephen? Crosscut song.
The production is very rhythm guitar heavy, and it's a great song. And the only other thing I'm going to add is this track a lot reminds me of something he would have done in Cream, because he would have this basically sounds like a 3-piece band, and then he just added rhythm guitar over it. That's pretty much what he did, I think. And it sounds, I mean, even the arrangement with it, he does it just like uh, King does it, Albert King, that kind of style of guitar. He basically mimics that part of it. And it's just the production and all, or this and the setup, the arrangement reminds me of the Cream setup a lot. And there was one that his playing reminded me of specifically, and I'll get back to that later. I'll let you know. about that one. But Crosscut Saw, it's a great song, brother. I like that he keeps going back. At least one of out of all these all his albums, he tries to go back and get an oldie, an old blues song. And I almost think he has a trend where he has in mind, like, I want to do an old blues song, at least one. I want to write a ballad. I want to write, a alternative type of song. I want to do a newer type, well, new then type of blues song in the 80s. More commercial sounding, and stuff like that. It seems like it's kind of a trend with all his albums up until that point, especially. So back to you.
Okay. And I'm like you on that whole thing where he does have this kind of routine worked out to where he brings in like an oldie and then a ballad or whatever. And like the previous album, Another Ticket had Blow Wind Blow, then Early in the Morning on Backless. So he kind of kept that trend going throughout. But then we moved to track number 9, Slow Down Linda. When I first heard this album, this was my favorite track on the album. Now I still like the track. I still think the track's a very good song, but it's not my favorite. My favorite would probably be possibly Crosscut Saw, or either the first track. Everybody ought to make a change is my favorite. But Slow Down Linda, straight up honky tonk country song, pretty much. And I talked about with the second track, it hit a theme of just this woman being alcoholic and not knowing how to control herself when getting a little too much alcohol in her system. This is one that's kind of weird because it's like it kind of seems kind of comedic, in which he's talking about this girl who just won't slow down. And there's also another theme I get from this song, but I kind of think it's a double entendre kind of theme. But between those two themes, I'll tell you the other theme when we get off. But overall, I think it's a cool track. And there is a bizarre. He did perform this song here and there on the tour. And there's this bizarre. It was some TV show that the band was on. I think it was only Clapton and Albert Lee on it. And they did this song in a much more, I mean, it was a purebred honky tonk pretty much. And they did this song and they had the people out there dancing, and it was extremely, extremely bizarre. I have to send it to you when we get off here, but still a good song. It went over pretty well live. I think it's a pretty good live track. So do you, Stephen. Slow Down Linda.
Well, I've got wrote down this song has a honky tonk sound, and if it was anybody but Eric, it probably would have sounded like crap. And in other words, this is another one of them, like I was talking about earlier, that ain't a great song to start with, but he kind of helped it along a lot with the band setup and his playing and overall, just rendition with it. And that's about all I got to say. It's a pretty decent song there, brother. Back to you.
Okay. So then we move to the final track on the album, Crazy Country Hop. This is the return of the new wave-ish feel for the album. I think this particular track's a very new wave-ish song, even though it was not. It was written way beforehand, and this was a cover of Johnny Otis. And of course, it seems to be much more of kind of a doo-wop-ish kind of shuffle song from back in the day, sock hops and stuff like that. You can tell it was written back then for something else. But overall, Crazy Country Hop used to be one I really didn't enjoy, but now I can dig it. I mean, it's a good closer to the album. I think it's a good closer, and that's pretty much all I have. So, Stephen, what's your thoughts?
My thoughts is it's filler, but I like the song a lot, but I can tell that they just didn't have anything else to do. So I think that I put in my notes verbatim. I'm guessing that Albert Lee had a lot to do with the recording this song choice rather. He is a country guitarist, and he probably brought this in, to tell you the truth. That's probably the origin of why this came about on the album. I can't see Clapton wanting to do anything like this. It kind of reminds me of the situation like when he first recorded "I Shot the Sheriff." It was one of them type of things like when George Terry strongly suggested that he record it. Basically, they made him after a while and he didn't even want to release it. But he did, and he said to his utter astonishment, it went straight to number one. So he says that's how much he knew about show business. But back to the source here, off my tangent. It's a straightforward track, and I really like it. And I just like the simplicity of this whole album, and this is the main example of that. I think it really lets the band shine through, and just very raw production and everything. I like the way it lets the band shine through, and that's about it for that one. So, to you, drummer.
All righty. And that's the end of the album. It clocks in at 37 minutes and 8 seconds, according to Wikipedia. His 8th studio record. So, even though the critical reception was kind of lukewarm, like I said earlier, it did very well. So, like I said prior to getting into the album, I was going to talk a little bit about the tour. So, I pulled up the average set list for the tour. I don't want to get into it way too deep, and I mean, a lot of it's greatest hits. I'll just go through the track listing, track by track, and just tell you what it is. So, a total of 17 tracks for the average set list that's compiled by setlist.fm. So it starts with Tulsa Time, then into I Shot the Sheriff, Worried Life Blues, Lay Down Sally, After Midnight, Double Trouble, Let It Rain, Sweet Little Lisa, which is an Albert King song, Key to the Highway, The Shape You're In, Wonderful Tonight, Blues Power, Have You Ever Loved a Woman, Rambling on My Mind, of course, I think that's the medley that he usually does. Cocaine, Layla, and Further On Up the Road. And some other tracks that were performed other than the basic set list was, let me pull it up here and tell you. So, the other songs that were performed besides the basic set list was Slow Down, Linda, I've Got a Rock and Roll Heart, Who's Loving You Tonight, which is a Jimmy Rogers cover, Blow Wind Blow, Crazy Country Hop was actually performed live, Crosscut Saw, Badge, Bottle of Red Wine, Everybody Ought to Make a Change, Motherless Children, Same Old Blues. So they must have started working on that very early, toward the late end of this tour. Sky is Crying, Ain't Going Down, Crossroads, Rita Mae, Sad, Sad Day, Goodnight Irene, Pink Bedroom, which is a John Hyatt cover, and then the medley, like I was talking about, of Rambling on My Mind, into Have You Ever Loved a Woman, Roll Over Beethoven, Don't Say You Don't Love Me, which is that's off another album probably. I could be totally wrong. Honeybee, Matchbox, which is Carl Perkins, Standing Round Crying, / Have You Ever Loved a Woman, Who's Loving You Tonight, / Have You Ever Loved a Woman, / Rambling on My Mind, You Win Again, a Hank Williams cover, Call It a Stormy Monday, Don't Say You Don't Love Me, Have You Ever Loved a Woman, / Rambling on My Mind, Honeybee, / Have You Ever Loved a Woman, Rambling on My Mind, Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out, Pretty Girl, Rock and Roll Music, a Chuck Berry song, Standing Around Crying, / Have You Ever Loved a Woman, / Rambling on My Mind, and That's All Right. So a pretty varied set list. So what do you think about the set list, Steve?
I'm very surprised at some of that stuff, especially You Win Again. I would love to hear that. This band's version of that, I would love to hear that for sure. If there's any kind of show, let me know, because I'd like to hear. But anyway, Yeah, that's a very interesting set list, and it's very blues heavy. I'm very
Definitely.
surprised, um, especially at this time period too. Especially since the '80s is getting into some different stuff, like Behind the Sun, what '85, I guess, and
Hmm.
I don't know if that was the very next album, but you get the point of about that era. That was mid '90s, so and pretty much that's pretty weird though. Him playing that much blues. I mean, it might as well be mid '90s. Nothing but the blues tour, almost. Besides, Pretty Girl and Layla and a couple of others. All those medleys. Good grief. But anyway, I mean, I would love to see it, but it is odd. I'll tell you that. Um, but like I said, I would really like to see that because it would probably be very guitar oriented for openings for Eric. Pretty much what I'm getting at, which is kind of different for this era. This album showed a lot of his playing too that hadn't been shown in a couple of albums previous to this. So that's pretty good and interesting too. So back to you, brother.
All righty, and I do want to talk about the touring lineup real quick because the lineup does differ between the time of touring. So pretty much the lineup is Clapton on guitar, Albert Lee on guitar. You've got Donald Duck Dunn on bass coming over from the album lineup. You've got, I want to say Roger Hawkins may have performed very early on, or possibly not. But Jamie Oldacre came back after kind of being let go at the end of the Backless tour and everything. You've also got Chris Stanton back on keyboards as well. So that pretty well rounds out the lineup. I think it's a five piece lineup. So overall, I give this album an 8.5 out of 10. So I'm just going to round it up, say a 9 out of 10. I like it. I think overall it's a very good album, very solid effort from Clapton himself, and that's I just like the album. I think it's a good album, and I really do need to pick this up on vinyl at one point and CD as well to have in my collection. So, Stephen, what's your personal thoughts, your ranking, and everything on this album?
Well, brother, I'd give it a 10 out of 10 rating. And I noticed that this album particularly has a lot of originals by Clapton, which I have mentioned slightly before. But I just like to point that out in my overall looking at the album, my overall review. So, in review, I love the simplicity of it, and this whole album would go over very well in a club scene or something, and which we've referred to that a lot before, but it's just a different way of saying it. It has the atmospheric sound to it, kind of spacey, if that makes any sense. Probably not. Eric has said before that he does this on purpose, and especially on these type of songs that are on this album because it fits well. Obviously, because of the structure and the origin of these songs, because some of them are from 20, 30 years prior, and that's the only time they could be played, pretty much. So, and I love it. 10 out of 10. And I tell you the truth, I was pretty much familiar with all these songs before my most recent listen today, except for the last one. I had never heard that one before. I don't know why, but the Crazy Country Hop, I had not heard of that one. I might have seen it once or twice, but I had never heard it. But I really like it, and I think it's a good closer because it kind of sums up the entire album. But back to you, Z.
All righty. So, picks of the week. What is your picks of the week, Stephen?
Again, I really need to start preparing for these picks of the week. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna just look around here. I'm gonna say, go listen to complete Clapton and the CD, and then I'm gonna say watch. I might have already said watch Jason Goes to Hell. I probably have. I'm not gonna say that one again. I will say go watch Frosty the Snowman. No, I'm just kidding. Uh, I've got a 10-man snowman thing in my room. That's what made me think of that. If you're wondering, I don't have that random of a mind. No, I will say go watch Star Wars, like episode 3. I think that's like Revenge of the Sith or something, if I'm
That's
not
it.
mistaken. I know that's very random, especially coming from, reviewing this album. But anyway, go watch that. To you, bro.
Okay. A little bit of a pause there. So
Yeah.
my pick of the week, I'm gonna go very similar with you and do a compilation by Clapton. And this is my personal favorite compilation because it's a varied compilation. It's more of the newer stuff, but it does edge more on the kind of the more straightforward rock type stuff and some blues thrown in there. And that is 2015's, I believe it's 2015's Forever Man. And two discs in the standard edition. You've got a live disc, which is a live compilation, and then you've got the first disc, which is a studio compilation. And all it is, it's a compilation of from when he started with Warner Brothers all the way up through the present. And of course, he's still with them now. So that's my CD pick of the week. And I'm going to kind of go outside the box as well with my pick. And I'm going to say go watch. I'm trying to think of something real quick. Go watch Detroit Rock City. It's a music related film. Of course, it's the Kiss movie from 99. Come out 99. Really funny comedy film. Got Giuseppe Andrews, Edward Furlong, Joe Flaherty's in it. Just a great cast all the way around. It's got all kinds of people in it. You wouldn't believe the cameos in it. But overall, very good film. I think Detroit Rock City is a good film. A little bit of a flawed film at points with the musical choices because some of them didn't come out in the years that they chose for the film. But that's just a little small gripe. And of course, with me being kind of OCD, that's what you get. But that's my pick of the week. I guess we can start wrapping things up if that's good with you, Stephen.
Yes, drummer.
All right. So, I mean, go follow our YouTube pages at Stephen Mott, his YouTube page. Just type in Stephen Mott. There's actually 2 on there I saw, but it's the one with the sky picture. It's not the one with the fellow standing there. Then you've got my page, Devin Dunnigan. Just type my name in. It should come up. Or just type in the Danger Zone Reviews, and that'll come up, or this podcast or something. And I've got all my reviews on there, as well as a few episodes of this podcast, because that was where I started posting at first. Then go follow the Dunnigan Mott Music and Movie Podcast page on YouTube. Just type it in. It should come on up there. And go follow us on Anchor.fm, podcasting platform. We've got a lot of episodes up on there as well. And more to come. I'm trying to get caught up to getting them up on there. But coming pretty soon, of course, is going to be the special episode of One More from the Road, Leonard Skinner. That's not going to come out directly after this episode, though. I'm going to hold that one back and put it out after a couple of more episodes, but we're going to go ahead and do it pretty soon and get it put in the backlog. And you'll hear this in about 2 weeks, so 2-3 weeks, something like that. And we just released on this day The Firm, so go check that out if you haven't already, because like I said, it'll be out way before this episode. And we're going to have some commentaries coming, and I'm going to start taking some of the older episodes and editing them and I'm going to make remastered versions. I'm going to go in, add some pictures, and add some different things, and some of those will probably already be out prior to this episode. So this will just kind of be something that's already happened. But I mean, go check out some of our friends, Pete, the guys at Freeform Rock Podcast, Lee and Mark. They're on the Danger Zone podcast with me on my channel. Well, I forgot to plug that. That's a podcast I do. It's kind of my solo podcast, and Mark and Lee's came on, so they're part of it now, and they've been on since the first episode. We just released a Van Halen discography part 2, which was very good. So it's me, Lee, and Mark, Danger Zone podcast. Then go check out Terrence Reardon Friends podcast. Go check out Diabolus and Podcastica, Vera Vault. Man, what else? Decibel Geek, Podcast, History Science Theater, We Hate Movies, We Watched a Movie, Revival House Network, Now Playing Podcast, the Spook House Podcast, R-Rated Horror Podcast, Movie Graveyard, Postmortem with Mick Harris. Just go check out. You got all. It's limitless out there, people. It's limitless. And I mean, go follow those great podcasts. They've got some great material out there. So that looks like that's the end of the episode. This will be episode number 14. And we hope you all enjoyed. Thanks for watching, listening, whatever. And if you're listening on Anchor when this episode eventually gets up there, thanks for listening there. And we're also on Spotify through Anchor as well. So thanks for watching, listening, like, comment, subscribe. Tell us what we can do better. Tell us what you think of the episodes. And just give us feedback. And please subscribe. Get the subscribers up on this channel. And, I mean, hit the little bell icon where you get all notifications when the episode goes up. We've been putting episodes out every Thursday. That's that's the day they come out. Danger Zone, when they come out on Tuesday. So I release Danger Zone on Tuesday and an episode of this on Thursday. So we're keeping content coming. So we hope you all enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Stay free, stay frosty, stay healthy, stay safe out there. God bless you all. And as I always say, see you next time.